Welcome to Radius Nights, part of the London Games Week, here at the Loading Bar in Stratford. I'm Tamer Asfahani.
I'm Georg Backer.
He is.
Yes, that's correct.
He is.
Good answer.
No, he actually is.
That's true. That's correct.
It's very good.
Yeah, and we're here. Where are we?
I just said we're at the Loading Bar in Stratford.
Oh, you did. Yeah. I'm not catching up. That's true. So and we're having a really interesting conversation tonight, hopefully, about what?
We're going to be talking about tech, gaming tech that's shaped gaming and shaped other parts of the industry as well. We're going to have some really exciting guests joining us and talking to us about this stuff. But we're going to start, we're going to do this as a two-parter, right? That's the plan.
That's the plan. So the first part is all about like technology and games and the past, what worked, what kind of didn't work. There were always interesting advancements in technology that excited us when we grew up as games, right? Yeah. Certain things that were like, this is going to be cool when it comes out, and they came out and it was shit. And then there's certain things that made it and stayed through to this day.
And there are certain things that also didn't make it, but were the foundation and the blueprint for more amazing and exciting things decades to come.
Exactly. So we want to exactly. That's how young we are. So we want to talk all about this, about the different technologies, and we've got awesome guests on the show.
Yeah.
Which we're going to introduce.
Let's get them on.
Before we do that, though, I should say that Radius Nights is, as you already mentioned, part of the London Games Festival, and I've got this brochure here. I'm just going to put it into this camera here, so everyone good. And so if you London Games Festival, it's got loads of interesting events for the next 10 days. The very cool thing is, if you go to Trafalgar Square right now, you'll see a huge Monopoly set on the floor. You can walk on it, and it looks great. Yeah. It looks great. So that's what
our cameraman, who's on camera 4, was there. Give us a nod, Pete. Was there filming it, so he was there for ITN this afternoon.
Did he go straight to jail? Okay, that was the first of the really bad jokes I promised I'll do tonight. And the other events at the London Games Festival is go to Somerset House. You see a nice collection of games there, and there will be Rest next week, and also the BAFTA Games Awards. So it's full of really cool stuff at the London Games Festival. And if you want to know more about the London Games Festival, go to games.london. That's it. That's simple. That's it. Brilliant.
And it's the first time, just very quick, it's the first time that a game festival's come back to London in 15 years now? Something ridiculous like that?
Yeah, I don't know. I'll just nod. Is that,
it's been a while.
It's been a while. Like under this umbrella, it's a lot of different
3 years apparently, not 15.
15, good. Well, off by a couple of years.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is, it contains a lot of very interesting events, some bigger, some smaller, and it's worth going.
Yep, absolutely.
Good.
Right, let's get the guests. Introduce the guests, George.
So, who should we start with?
Bring them all on.
Let's bring all the guests on. They can introduce themselves. Yay! Imagine applause.
Yeah, woo! Be good.
Sit however you like. Oh, good.
Brilliant.
Good, brilliant.
So, should we start from my left, and we'll move across that way?
You've got a nice. Yeah, let's start from your end.
So why don't you all just introduce yourself, just your names, your titles, and I think we'll start with that. I think that might be the best way to go. So go on, off you go.
I'm Barry Meade. I'm a co-founder and director of Fireproof Studios, and we make a mobile game called The Room, and Amiga Agent on for VR.
Can everybody hear? Yeah? Good.
I'm Katherine Bidwell. I'm co-founder of State of Play Games. You probably know us for our game Lumino City.
I'm Payne. I do a number of different things, and my title is Mr.
My name is David Rack. I'm also one of the co-founders and directors of Fireproof Studios / Games, and done the Room series and also Omega Agent on Rift and Gear VR.
Brilliant.
And we did the introductions already. No. We already know who I am. Yeah. So what we want to do, Tamer and I, we've discussed how we should start, and we thought why don't we pick something from the past, one thing that had an impact and one thing that didn't have an impact. And the one thing that I picked as that sounded really great, but probably didn't do very well at all was the Power Glove. If you remember the Power Glove, remember the Nintendo Power Glove? So and I remember the Power Glove. I remember the Power Glove, and any other device. There was a Power Glove. There was the P5 glove. There's quite a few of those around, and I always remembered oh my God, it's going to be awesome. Like I can control everything with my hand. And at that time I was working on a game called Black and White, and we tested out the P5 glove, and to my mind it sounded like the perfect fit.
Because Black and White
was you played the hand of God, so you played with a mouse, hand of God, and it was like you could actually use your real hand to control everything. Sounds great. So, but I remember trying it the first time and being totally underwhelmed because the tech itself was great because he had positional tracking and everything, and it wasn't the tech what the problem was. You know what the problem was? My hand got really tired after 2 minutes.
It was heavy, wasn't it?
It was just like nobody wants to do this. Like when you play a game for about 2 hours, that's why you've got a mouse. So that was when I realised that maybe not all tech that sounds great is great at the end. And so that was an example of tech that sounded great but didn't work. And another tech that made huge advances not only in gaming but everywhere, but above gaming and beyond, was something as simple as 3D graphics. Like if you remember the Voodoo graphics card, and I think there's a couple beforehand, but something that was quite expensive, quite bulky, and you had to quite even at that point it was quite advanced but also quite restrictive in what you could do.
2 or 3 PCI slots on PCs.
It was,
right?
but
Hungry
It
beast.
was really hungry.
But it was one of those things that kind of like sped up the development of 3D graphics, and to the point where 3D graphics that was primarily developed for games, the technology made its way into other areas like visual effects and other things. So that's the sort of like thing we would sort of like want to like talk about. And the first question to our esteemed guest is like, do you remember a piece of tech that you're quite excited by, but that didn't do well, or a piece of tech that you're quite excited by that sort of like you think made it bigger than games? And
Yes.
I'm really excited about your answer.
I know, it's not actually that it was actually not that far away in time terms. So motion controllers,
Yes.
right? So, when I got my Wii, it was amazing. And my mother would be playing tennis with me. And we had fun, bowling.
I love that's the universal sign for tennis and bowling and boxing and
I
everything.
may find out you've got the universal sign on your head. Please reveal the tennis headband. Look, there we are. John McEnroe will be very pleased with that.
Not be serious.
But the motion controllers and the Kinect as well, they were ultimately, what really annoys me about that stuff is that it gave us all hope, genuine hope, that things were going to change. And it sort of did, but it really didn't. And it's gone nowhere.
Well, the Wiimote is an interesting one because the Wiimote was released, but it didn't have the one-to-one ratio movement. And then they released the attachment, I can't remember what it was called, the Wiimote Plus or whatever the hell it was. And then that made it one-to-one, but that was only after Sony had released the Move. So that Move had come out and then we had responded. And it was a really weird one, actually.
It's just that there was so much possibility there. And everyone, the Wii was a kind of game changer in so many ways for video games. And yet, it wasn't, if you know what I mean. So it's like, it really promised everything. It delivered something. You thought, this is amazing.
And they came out with the balance board as well.
Yeah,
And it was like,
yeah, we were saying that. And about the Wii as well, the first time you did the boxing, you're just like, this is the future. Oh my God, I've been, But then I think I remember doing that about 3 or 4 times. And then, we were saying about the bowling, you start doing it like that. And then by your 4th time, you're just like, got to strike. And again, had so much potential, so much excitement, but
And it
just
hasn't moved
didn't.
on.
No.
In that around that time, you had a few other technologies that emerged. That was like to connect the PlayStation Move we talked about. The
U-Draw was the foundation, as far as I'm concerned, for the Wii U. So the U-Draw was THQ's.
U-Draw bust THQ.
Yeah, exactly.
That company.
I think there was like 30,000 units in their warehouse that they didn't sell, and that was one of the main reasons.
And actually, it's quite interesting that was potentially the forerunner of the Wii U.
Exactly.
Which, has been a massive
Success.
failure.
Yeah, absolutely.
To have some good games on it, though. Apparently,
Well, Nintendo games are the best games in the world.
That is, well, there you go. You've heard it. Yeah, that's true.
That doesn't mean
hardware,
the
right?
technology is
Yeah.
the best technology in the world.
But the interesting one, what I realised when I was going through the timeline for this topic tonight is because when I worked during the time when I worked at Lionhead Studios, that was the time when also the Kinect was sort of like was launched, and I was actually quite excited about the Kinect. And what I realised about it though is it was quite the tech itself was great. But it's kind of like, how do you apply it to games, right? It's the thing, like, how do you make games more, how do you make it work better with games? Because for me, the reason why I love controllers, like the control pads, is because I'm shit at everything that a character has to do in video games. So if I would have to do Kung Fu, and I'd have to do any sense of motion control in Kung Fu, I'd automatically be shit. But give me a controller, and I can learn a series of commands, and I'll be awesome. So this translation of like, you use your real body to control something, like you control your character on screen, was always kind of like a little bit jarring to me, because I felt like...
Kinect wasn't the first one that did it, guys. I mean, I don't know if you remember iToy on the PlayStation. That was the first input, really, which, we're talking...
Washing windows.
Yeah, washing windows, cleaning stuff up. So the interface, I think, I think it was, but I think people forget that gamers don't want to, if gamers wanted to play football, they'd go out and play football. They wouldn't sit down and play FIFA or Pro Evo or whatever. But I mean, as far as, what do you remember from tech that you think has failed but has, done well?
I do remember, I'm old enough to remember Silicon Graphics, and when that was such a big thing. Straight after what you were talking about, the Voodoo, when Voodoo graphics came out, everyone assumed that, all right, so everyone now has to buy these huge graphics machines that cost $100,000 to fuel their games. And I remember in Bullfrog we were given 2 SG machines by Silicon Graphics to use in our games. And like, fast forward a year later, they blew up because they were catching so much dust in the air. They'd never been touched. Wow. And so that was a pure example of like overblown expectations and just completely, it was a redundant business model. You can't, some of those machines cost $500,000, so no games company could survive buying those things. So they were out the window, and people started using Macs and much cheaper options that way. And they're still the industry standard today. And everyone just threw off the idea that we should be using specialized graphics machines. So that's one thing I remember personally.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because those, along with those graphics cards, there were a slate, probably a little bit earlier than that, a slate of failed consoles. So you had the Atari Jaguar, I think it was. You had the Apple Pippin, which was the Apple and Bandai thing.
That was amazing. Apple was like the Pippin.
Yeah. Connex made in Wales, yeah, exactly. We laugh now, but we were the hub of gaming technology at the time. Well, we drove technology forward. I think at that time, Britain was at the forefront.
Home computers is different.
At the cutting edge.
Home computers,
but
for sure.
Even for development and console development and consoles themselves, okay.
Well, America...
Maybe we weren't the hub, but we were certainly... I think America and Japan were a little bit better than us, based on the numbers.
But the interesting thing, going quickly back to the Apple Pippin, the really interesting thing about that one is because it was it tried to be the living room thing. It was I think mid-90s when they released it, tried to do the living room thing. They only sold about 42,000 units, and one unit cost about $600. So it's in line with $600. So that was Apple's. Yeah, after Apple released.
That was the thing. Yeah. Nobody was developing for them.
Apple released a games console in the mid-90s, and kind of like it was unheard of. And it was only sold 42,000 units, but it had all this tech in there. Like, it wanted to be the media console, it wanted to do everything. It was sort of like too expensive, nobody wrote games for it, and also it was a time when the internet hadn't been broken through yet.
And
so
knew Apple, that was the other thing.
Yeah, they got ahead of themselves. So, and when I researched the stuff, I was like, it's quite interesting. There's this thing like, there's a lot of tech that gets tried out in games or in connection with games, where the first round kind of like always seems to fail. Like you've got a great idea, you do something tech-wise, you do it, you think everybody's going to like it, it fails. But then wait a few years, and then somebody else comes along and says, "Oh, I know how to do it now," does it in a short amount of time, and does the next iteration, and suddenly becomes the big star. But you always seem to forget the people who laid all the groundwork that was sort of like build up on failure. Well, in that sort of like sense, but it kind of, as already mentioned before, like paved the way for the future in a way.
The point you make about the fact is that gamers want to use a controller. There doesn't seem to be anything else that for a long time. We had joysticks originally, and they've made way for controllers. You've still got keyboard and mice in PC games, but gamers are comfortable. Twitch marshals are educated now to play games with a controller, and yet companies around games want to make something different and something else that will somehow make it really easy. And I think the biggest development there has just been touch. With your game, Harry, is all about touch.
This is exactly what I was
You
going to
know?
say. I mean, you guys have used the technology perfectly. I mean, George and I were talking about this the other day, and actually, your game is really the only was the pioneer. The Room, the Room. If anybody doesn't know what it is, if you don't, you shouldn't be watching this.
Nothing to do with Tommy Wiseau.
You had to bring it up.
But talk to us about, I mean, how you approach this, because obviously a touch device had been around for a little while. I mean, in terms of technology, it wasn't new technology.
No, the iPhone was already massive. The iPad had already had one iteration by the time we released the Room. We released it for the Room 2, for the iPad 2. The thing was, at the time when we were before we were leading up to the release of the Room, the console and PC games industry was trying to figure out whether or not they could actually make a living on mobile. Was mobile a gaming device in the true sense, or was it actually just only capable of doing like point and click Facebook type games, which were very popular on mobile at the time? And so there was this effort to port and report old games onto mobile and then see if it worked. But they were really bad. They were just really bad versions of games, and they kept using virtual D-pads, which don't really work with the touch interface. So the way we looked at it, no one was really taking the platform seriously. Like if they were making a PlayStation game, they wouldn't try and import fake, virtual mouse controls, right? They would work with the tech that they were given, and they would make the best version they could with the control system that was natural to the platform. So when we were making the Room, we didn't think twice about ever. Like our whole way was like, well, we have to build it for the platform, right? And forget about everything else that's happening. What could we do with the platform as it stands right now? Forget if consoles exist, forget the PC exists. It's a touch-based interface piece of hardware with some very powerful graphics behind it. We should be able to do something on this. That was kind of the way we looked at it. And
it was hugely successful.
It was very successful. I mean, for a small team, it was hugely successful. Yeah, absolutely.
It was very successful, even if it would be a big team.
Yeah, I know, but you remember when you're in the mobile world, you're exposed to just how much money other people make. And so like we make in years what other people make in a day, right? So we don't think of ourselves as successful in that way. We think of ourselves as successful because we're like 14 people in an office who now have made a living and a workable living for themselves, making their own games their own way without any interference from anybody else. That's our success.
But it was, and as it's been mentioned, it was a title that kind of like defined the touch thing in gaming. And I remember this conversation. I had a lot of conversations with people around that time about like what sort of like games they played. Everybody brought up the Room as like, that's the game where I understood why I have the iPad. It set
the benchmark, right? It set the benchmark of what you could do with that technology, and.
Maybe, I mean, but remember there were pure touch.
There weren't. That's it.
There were pure touch-based, proper, full-on, mobile-only video games that were doing very well at that stage. It was just that the console and PC, the AAA industry, didn't take those games seriously, so they ignored what those games were achieving on the platform. Whereas games like Angry Birds and the sort of the timeline of that, which goes up through Flappy Birds and to Crossy Road, even stuff like that now. Where people were much smarter than the AAA industry, and they just said, "You're just doing it wrong. Yeah. You're just not making a game for the audience that has this device."
I think it also liberated developers, right? I mean, that was the other thing. You didn't have to be attached to a studio. You didn't have to be attached to a publisher. You didn't have to have milestones, or you didn't have to get budgets and hit these milestones in order to get the money for it.
That's a
whole other story as well. But my point is, it liberated you guys to do what you wanted.
Yeah, we did it because we literally couldn't afford to make a video game on any other platform. So.
And I want to come to you, Andy, very quickly on sorry, I'm going to just jump over because you were very involved. My childhood was based on your games, flight sims. I spent a lot of my time.
I even bought Bionic Granny. I don't know if you were there in those years. It was the heady years of Bionic Granny.
But simulators, I think, were. I mean, if we're moving to games that set the agenda.
Very interesting. So Flight Simulator and Train Simulator are still PC-based games, simulations. They will be Xbox based soon.
Is that an exclusive?
No, no. Everyone knows that.
Have you got an exclusive?
Well, everyone bar one. No. And they will be potentially VR experiences as well.
But that's my point.
But the interesting thing is, it's 30 years. Microsoft Flight Simulator's been around in some shape or form, and it's still using effectively keyboard, mice, and joysticks.
But again, this is something that I want to pick up on because we, moving forward with the technology that's advanced, I think there are VR and AR, augmented reality, virtual reality, HoloLens, or if you want to look at the PlayStation, what are they calling it? PlayStation VR, right? Yeah, PSVR, or Oculus Rift, which are now both commercially available. Vive as well. We were talking last night about this, George and I, and for me, VR fails, and for George as well, fails because there's still no real, you can't interact with your environment the same way as you would want to. You have to, your hands aren't busy. But with flight simulators, it's very different because you've got a control system, you've got your throttle, you've got your yoke, you've got your pedals, you've got your rudder pedals, you've got your multifunction displays that you can kind of figure out where you're going.
And also you've got the opportunity for real motion, as well as it's not a twitch. I mean, flight simulation, unless it's combat, okay. Flight simulation, train simulation, it's not twitch. It's it's controlling the engine, controlling the aircraft in real time to a technical spec that really exists, and the opportunity with VR is to get that immersion. I think the difficulty with VR is for anyone who's used it, it can be quite claustrophobic. It can be hot, and this kind of idea of having this lump of plastic around your head. I mean, we haven't really moved on from the 90s visually. In terms of the kit inside, yes, we have massively.
So a little bit lighter.
Yeah, I mean, but if you remember the VR sets of the mid-90s, they were sort of like this big, and now they're not so big, but they're still covering your eyes and half your head.
That's what the beauty of, I think, AR is, things like HoloLens, because they offer an alternative to the complete immersion, and actually they don't disconnect you from the real world. I mean, is that fair to say?
If they're as good as they say they are. I mean,
I'm not completely sold on the HoloLens at the moment, just purely because of the size of the screen that you can actually see, until they can kind of widen that and improve the size of it. Yeah, it's only a matter of time that it'll happen.
Just have some widescreen TVs in the eye. That's what it is. So I wanted to ask, on the table, or specifically you, because you guys worked in Lumino City, which was an awesome game. I really loved that game, by the way, as well. I also love The Room, but it was one of those things which, for me, combined the craft of physical, like the physical world, because it's sort of like because it's like this world that you build a physical set for, and then you used is it still images or was it video? A video to record it all and then put it all together, and it's like, for me, that's sort of like the culmination of all sorts of tech coming together, right? And for me, every time that happens, and it doesn't matter how far the advance in technology, like every time somebody makes a game that combines physicality, physical stuff in the real world with the stuff in the virtual world, it's always like it's always got the Disney spark for me. It always feels like it's really awesome. But I was going to ask you, how do you, and I don't know if what the future plans are for games, but how do you see techs like VR and HoloLens, all these things, for the way you want to make games? Because I think it might be a totally different experience if you want to take what you did with Lumino City into the world of VR or the world of HoloLens or so.
I think taking Lumino City in a VR world is like just something that we haven't really thought about, and it wouldn't suit it. I think having some elements of like handmadeness in this VR environment is quite interesting, and it's something we look at developing, but it's just going to be hard to have that. But I think when VR is combined with real objects that you can pick up, and things like that, that's really interesting. Yeah. But I have to say, I haven't done. But also, I think the interesting about VR that I wanted to say was it's going to suit short form games. I think. Because of the experience, because of the claustrophobic, it's like an hour and you've had enough, possibly. So that's going to be a really interesting time for kind of indie studios to take advantage of that.
Have you tried? Anyone of you tried the HoloLens yet? Have you no, I haven't tried it. I don't know. So I haven't. No, I haven't. But I'm quite intrigued. But the thing about the HoloLens, what is quite interesting is Microsoft doesn't seem to be marketed towards games that much, but more towards educational stuff like medicine, and I think their big thing is being able to walk on Mars. There's this whole demo which looks pretty amazing. You walk on Mars, you look around and whatnot. So maybe they've learned from connecting. But the second question I had regarding, and again, Lumino City for me, that kind of inspires these questions. It's if from all the tech that's around in the future, is there anything that excites you the most for making games, the next games, the kind of games that you're sort of making, or is Lumino City not just an example of the type of games that you want to make?
Really, I mean, there's nothing that I can think that, we're going to do that, because a lot of our games come from the idea and we work the technology towards that. I mean, with these guys, smartphone has just, I think our primary device that we are now publishing for, I'd probably say is a smartphone, just because of the ease and the way our games suit it. So I don't think there's anything coming up that we're grabbing hold of, but as graphic tablets, as all this stuff gets better for our visual pleasing games, I guess, that's really exciting. And
so it's the processor power, the GPU, the memory.
Well, I do think there's an issue that everything's getting faster, and the world's speeding up. Things are winning and losing much quicker than ever, and I do think that the concept that you buy a console, whether it's a PlayStation, Xbox, or a Nintendo machine, and you somehow think that's going to last 5 years, I think that's got to be tipped as a concept. I think the consumer, has been conditioned to thinking I'm going to invest in a PlayStation or an Xbox, and it's going to cost me a few £100, and that's going to last. But I think the wheels are coming off that, because the developments in smartphone devices that we have in our pockets are no one cares. People are just upgrading things all the time.
Well, smartphones cost more than a console.
Yeah, I mean, you go and buy a new iPhone. The top of the range iPhone's about £700.
Yeah. 3 times the price of a console.
Yeah, and you got it in your pocket. Now, I think big screen gaming. We're in a bar where there is big screen gaming going on just over there, and everyone's enjoying it. Big screen gaming is what most people will really enjoy. Yeah. It's not one or the other. You don't have to have it small, portable, or big screen. But I do think the issue of fixed devices over 4, 5, 6, 7 years, I mean, that's just not going to wash.
Sony have just announced their PS4.5, haven't they? Well, they're talking about it, and there's rumours of it.
You heard it here first, people.
Dave yes, I actually work for Sony, and no. Yeah, so everyone's talking about the fact that they're going to be doing this.
What, the cross-platform play?
No, the PS4.5.
It's kind of of course. But cross-platform play is also another really interesting thing, because if we're starting to talk about Microsoft and Sony now, how long will it be before we can start cross-platforming everything?
Yeah. Sony are publishing games on the PC, so they've already announced that. Yeah, they've announced that.
Well, they've been doing that for a while. I think there was Sony. So Sony Online Entertainment was it The Agent back in the 2000s, and that was cross-platform between PC and PlayStation.
The PlayStation exclusive is now going to be on the PC because, it makes commercial sense for everybody.
And because Microsoft never took advantage of their Microsoft Games platform.
But I do think that's another thing that potentially could start to break down, is the walls between the various formats. Yeah. And they're starting to get nonsensical. If you try and explain to a 7 or 8 year old boy who shouldn't be playing or shouldn't want to play Halo that it does not work on his PlayStation, that's a difficult conversation, because and I think that is starting to make no sense.
So how difficult then for you guys all as developers will it be to basically have to develop the same game for multiple formats across multiple? We know it was difficult enough with PlayStation and Xbox, and then with the Wii, if people wanted to do a version for the Wii, and then if they wanted to do a tablet version or a smartphone version. I mean, if now there is this, with Moore's Law, I think it's Moore's Law, isn't it? Every 2 years, everything accelerates and doubles. So how difficult is it going to be for you guys as developers to then what I'm trying to say is the one platform format now redundant? I suppose that's the question.
No, I don't think so. I don't think every game is suitable for every format. I mean, the concept of using a controller, wireless controller to your PlayStation to play Angry Birds, I kind of think, well,
I would never
really?
play Angry Birds on the Xbox.
Really? I mean, many people probably do love it, but it's not really kind of what it was designed for. So, I think there's the opportunities are massive, and each device has got its own sort of idiosyncrasies. And as a developer, as a publisher, you don't have to do it on every single device. And equally,
But at least there can be expectation. That's my point.
As soon as we get a game out, it's like, what about Linux? What about Android? When are you coming out? So, and I think there's always a conversation we have in our room about when we're developing a game, when we're, what devices is it going to be on? But I don't feel the pressure to, like, if it's not out on everything, it's gonna, it's gonna fail or whatever. With things like, the room and iOS for us. I think if we just launched Lumino City on iOS, we would have been, we'd be fine. But
launching on multiple platforms has traditionally been, the thrust for much bigger companies than ours. It's always easy but it's affordable and possible for someone like EA to release on 5 platforms at once. But small studios, that's really hard. Even with the onset of Unity and Unreal and all of these technologies, which do really help, it's still expensive and time-consuming, and it costs energy, and it's still involved, and you still have to make an amazing version of the Dragon 32 version or whatever. You can't get away with a bad version, So you have to craft it on every single one to make sure it's really good in order for that cross-play to even matter, right? Because if it sells 10 million on one console and then nothing on the other, then why did you go to all that hassle? So you'd have to make sure every single one is amazing and then hope to God that it sells. It's difficult and it's hard and it's expensive to do that. When your company's of our size, you can't do it.
How many platforms is the room on? Is it different?
It's on. You mean other than mobile devices?
Total, including mobile and everything.
Just iOS, Android, and PC.
And Kindle as well.
On Kindle, yeah.
you didn't do the Microsoft version.
No, we didn't. No.
Why is that? Out of curiosity.
Because no one buys games on that platform, as far as we know.
It's amazing.
If we heard otherwise, then we would do it. Right? So.
I wanted to ask, because we touched on VR, and I wanted to ask a question, maybe the answer's probably going to be no, I'm just still going to ask it. Has anyone worked on a game for the Virtual Boy? And do you remember the Virtual Boy? The Virtual Boy? The first of the Game Boy that was meant to be VR. Did anyone in the audience this red thing where everything looked red, but it was 3D, and it was amazing looking. It looked amazing, the Virtual Boy. But I've yet to find someone who's developed for it.
I wasn't in the industry then.
Andy, did you?
I would imagine that there have been mainly Japanese developers.
Like same for the Virtual Boy.
Nintendo were the only people
Probably.
who ever made it for it.
Because it was around for about 5 minutes and then disappeared. But it was.
Like the Dreamcast.
Yeah, but well. Oh God, bless the Dream. Dreamcast was amazing.
It was. That's the point. It was amazing, but it was. I mean, the marketing I think was what killed
You could
that.
probably, to be kind, because I was rude earlier about the Wii U, you could say the same about the Wii U.
No, absolutely.
It just didn't, it was a very difficult machine for people to for Nintendo to market. It's, kind of like not easy to explain what the Wii U was or is. And it doesn't make it a bad machine.
And you can't get more than one tablet. I still can't get my head around that.
Yeah, I know.
The interesting thing regarding the Virtual Boy, because the reason why I brought this is that Nintendo then, what Nintendo actually wanted to do is create like a very immersive version of their Game Boy. So the Virtual Boy didn't kind of work. Then I think they brought out, shortly before afterwards was a color Game Boy as well, it must have been before. But then eventually they worked so hard to get like 3D into a space where you didn't have special glasses, right? Remember the Nintendo 3DS from a tech point of view, I remember reading the Nintendo 3DS and be like, when they said, you won't need any special glasses to do the 3D thing, I was like, that's bullshit, that's a marketing trick. And I remember the first time I had it, it was like, that was, again, magic for me. That was magic. But weirdly...
It was like the Wii.
Yeah, but I turn it off now. Like when I play 3D,
Well,
I turn it off.
the fact that you turned it off anyway. I got myself a 3DS. I was really excited. The first game I played on it was Pro Evolution Soccer, and it looked amazing. Played terribly. Yeah. And then it gradually started its journey back to the box, literally. And the 3DS was just, well, basically it was a nicer version of DS.
But the point is that there's a lot of, I think this is why we chose this subject matter, because there's a lot of technology that's inbuilt to games that's either ahead of its time or isn't used or is left dormant. PlayStation 3, for example, had 3D gaming in it as well. Do you know what I mean? But you needed to have a 3D TV and you need to be able to have the power to do it. So, and I suppose, we've only got like 5 or 10 minutes to wrap this part of the show up. And I think maybe if we could all just go through the kind of the tech that we think is laid dormant, that has actually advanced our gaming, or not even just gaming, it could be anything, you know what I mean, in any technology. Is there anything that sticks out in your mind that started, I really want to talk about special effects as well, because I think that's a really important angle that we have neglected thus far, and I'd like to talk about that in the next part, but maybe things that have helped kind of advance technology that has actually been born from gaming. Have you got any thoughts or any ideas? For me, it's flight sims. For me, I think everybody trains now on flight simulators. I trained to do my pilot's license before 9/11 happened, and on flight simulators. I'm an Arab. I was in Cuba 2 days before it happened. Enough said. I never learned how to land.
Caught you. It's good.
No, it's all right. I never learned the landing technique. But for me, flight sims is all joking aside, now simulators are part and parcel of anything. Even Tim Peake, used virtual reality to a sort of amazing thing where if he got disconnected from the International Space Station, he then had to use limited thrusting power to get back to his
Well, I think we all sort of quest for the really defining, orgasmic piece of technology. Actually, if you look at how video games or computer and video games have influenced some parts of the world, I would say in the world of football. So if you talk, Miles Jacobson, who runs Sports Interactive, who make Football Manager, I'm a West Ham supporter, just down the road, been to the game today, robbed. And are you a Crystal Palace fan team there, is it? Chelsea. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah, okay. I remember when they were shit. Well, you actually, it's a few weeks ago. But Miles's team, and the Collier brothers, they run Football Manager, and that is now sewn into the world of professional football in a major way. Okay, Scouts are using it, teams are using it, and that has really advanced the knowledge base around players. How good they are, how good they may be in their own leagues. All of the statistics is incredible. And also FIFA and Pro Evolution, but more so FIFA. Young boys, generally boys rather than girls, are learning the world of football at the age of 4, 5, 6, 7, and they are encyclopedic, like we were when we were kids. About if you were interested in football, like I was, we had little stickers and cards, but now this is encyclopedic, and the knowledge base around the game is incredible. And video games have effectively done that. And that is something that people may find interesting, may not find interesting. Things like Democracy that Cliff Harris has made. So the latest version is Democracy 3. It's basically a political simulator. And what's really interesting about it is it's politics in its rawest sense. Yeah. Okay? Yeah. It's almost politics without the politics. It's theoretical politics. And actually, if you play that for a few hours, you realise how difficult it is to do anything in politics, how difficult it is to run the world and make decisions. And when everyone's shouting for Donald Trump or, Alex Salmon or somebody else, as if they're kind of this magical, gonna solve the problems, it's like, no, they're not. Actually, life's quite complicated. And there's a bloke called Cliff Harris who's kind of demonstrated that. And he's come from video games, and he's made something magnificent. And it's only for a small niche of people, but that could have a massive influence in how people view how difficult it is to do things. in life.
I played Democracy, and I was always trying to be very liberal and like raise taxes on things like smoking and tobacco and alcohol and all that stuff. I was trying to like let's do the health service, let's do all that stuff, and I got assassinated by the right wing. That's essentially what happened in the game. Like, you got assassinated, but that's game over.
Get voted in, so you won't get voted. That's it. That's the reality. So there you go. So those things are interesting.
What about you? Like, do you any specific tech?
Yeah, we talked about 3D graphics earlier, but the influence gaming has had on the film industry and the film graphics, special effects within that, it's almost like you're creating virtual.
Didn't they? They acquired a special effects studio for exactly that reason.
Yeah, you're creating virtual worlds almost in the film. So, and I would have thought gaming and the technology that advanced the 3D graphics has massive influence on that.
I think I read this interview a very long time ago that when The Matrix came out, they're very careful to use the same production process, the workflow that they did all the visual effects shots, so that could be used later in games and whatnot. So they try to prep all the data in a way that it all works in one. I think that was one of the things that they implemented back then. Which, because I think some of the visual effects people came from the games industry at that point as well. So it was quite interesting.
They're just big fans.
Or they're just big fans.
Yeah.
Well, film has been majorly affected by video games, hasn't it? And it's a massive deal. But I think even things like, for me, another one for me, and I don't know if this is, you guys can chime in on this, voice recognition. That has actually been around for a very long time. I remember first playing it on SOCOM on the PlayStation 2. Yeah. I don't know if you remember SOCOM. Yeah. And the voice recognition software on that was phenomenal. And then a decade later, it was on End War, Ubisoft's End War. Yeah, and now, voice recognition is integrated into consoles and tablets and smartphones and everything. So
my TV, I have to control my TV via voice controller.
My TV doesn't listen to me, but that's because it doesn't have voice enabled.
That's because who does listen to? So.
I know, right? But I mean, for you guys, from that perspective, voice recognition. I mean, is that something that excites you as developers, especially in your...
Not really. I don't even use the voice recognition on my phone. Like, so many people go, hey Siri or whatever. Don't do anything.
Siri used to be amazing, by the way.
Yeah. I don't know, I just don't use it. I prefer to use the little keyboard.
I want to play the room with voice recognition. Hey, solve the puzzle for me, because I'm too stupid. Ta-da! Solved. So, yeah.
It's called YouTube.
It's called YouTube.
But like nothing. Like, come on, Barry. Like you must have like something that you wanted to become reality. That's something, a piece of hardware, some piece of tech that you were so excited about but never made it. Nothing.
No. I'd be cynical about all of this stuff until it works. Yeah, I mean that's the way I think about everything. It's all well and good to be full of beans about a particular piece of hardware or whatever, but like you just run through, right? There's just been so many failures in terms of all of these things.
So many failures.
Well, we did. I mean, even like everything from consoles, never mind the peripherals.
Yeah, of course.
How many legions of consoles have failed, and so.
Well, let's talk about that in the next section, because that is present and future, and set, I think, the precedent for virtuality. Yeah, it's about to happen.
What would be interesting is to discuss, like, is this technology great, and it's actually the content that isn't matching it.
That's the thing. Like I remember, because when I worked on Fable, and that was around when the 360 came out as well. And you always had, with every launch, and you guys, I think you probably remember this. Like, a console lived and died by its launch set, but also, more importantly, what the next wave was. Like, he always wants to know, like, okay, you always come up new, the first few games released, but you want to also know what's coming up. And when a console launched and didn't know what the next wave was, or the next wave didn't look interesting, you had no interest. I remember this, so for me, I think when the PlayStation 3 came out, I think that was the thing where it was like, oh, this looks really cool from a tech perspective. And I loved what was the car game called that they...
Crazy Taxi.
No, the GTs, I can't remember what it's called.
GTA.
No,
Gran Turismo.
Gran Turismo, that's right.
Gran Turismo was phenomenal, but that was on the PlayStation 1.
Yeah, but the third one looked, I remember the third one looked amazing, but then I couldn't remember, like, all the other games coming in the months after that didn't look as appealing to me. So that's But then I was like, oh, I really want to. And I bought a PlayStation 2. I think I got a PlayStation 2 at that point because I was like,
I think there's a sort of another thing that there's never talked about. Okay, yes, PlayStation 4s. There's about 40 million on the planet sold, but how many of those have been bought by people who want to play FIFA? Yeah, FIFA. You know, and how, you know, if you look at the world, you know, if you look at the world of esports, games are getting played by people. Fewer games are getting played longer, and people are investing their time to get good. To get good, right? So when we hear all this, it's the fastest selling console. The world's changed. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's like Xbox. People want to play Call of Duty. They want to play the next Call of Duty. If that's all they play, that's all they play, because they are now able to play as connected communities for hours and hours and hours for prize money. So you know, things have changed, and this concept that somehow because they trot out this attach rate nonsense. You know, you buy a console and you get the attach rate of number of games you buy. I think the world's changed. I don't think everyone's like that. You know, there are video gamers who only play FIFA. And if you want to talk to them about anything else, football manager players. Generally speaking, football manager takes up so much time that there isn't much time for anything else. So you play football manager. It's like, okay, you know, there's not this kind of one rule suits all. And I think there's a lot of the analysts try and, you know, shoehorn stuff into these.
Is that the universal symbol for
shoehorn? Yeah, shoehorn.
Same as the Wiimote.
Jemmy.
Well, I think that's a great place to leave it, guys. We'll wrap it up here for part one. Thank you very much for joining us. The next part we'll be talking about present and future tech, and where we can expect to go, and maybe a bit more kind of dystopian world that we might end up in, or utopian. Thank you very much, and we'll see you in just a few minutes.
2 seconds. Hopefully, when you kick on.
Shh, George. They don't know. We'll see you next week.
Okay. Okay. Woo! Okay.